So I'm obsessed with this notion that every second that passes, we're losing one of our greatest human resources, our history. See, we're in this unique moment in time in media, where on one hand, we have physical artifacts, videos, photos, oral history, and they're vanishing every day. It's estimated that 17 million physical media assets are lost to destruction and decay each month. Now, on the other hand, we have digital content creation, which is happening at such a rapid clip that trigger-happy photo thumbs and skies full of cloud storage leave us with the opposite problem: too many data points. And so our most meaningful stories, our history, is scattered across cluttered social media feeds, buried in overflowing cloud folders, and disorganized on our smartphone screens right now. And that leads to the question: if you or I or someone we love disappear, how does their story get told? My obsession started several years ago when I found a crate of old records. They were my father's, Michael, and they were hidden behind a silk curtain in a cabinet in my living room, a cabinet that my mother had turned into an altar for Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy, who we prayed to more frequently as my father grew more ill and eventually passed away when I was a boy. When I found those records, though, it was like finding treasure. I was an overjoyed kid, sifting through the vinyl, dusting off the turntable, and listening to the hits of the Beatles, The Who, Miles Davis, Coltrane, and then there was this song.
Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long now.
This was the song that was my dad's my song. It brought everything forward, rushes of memory existing in compartments of my mind unearthed. Don Henley wailed, and as that needle spinned in infinite circles, it literally felt like my father was reaching across the boundaries of time and space and putting his hand on my shoulder and singing with me. I felt uplifted at that moment. But as soon as that high descended, I felt a deep pang of regret. There was so much I didn't know about my father. So much of his life story was still a blank canvas. And I learned from others that they were going through the same thing, someone they loved who had passed or even who was living that they wanted to understand and know more about. And so I became determined to help find better ways to capture our history, to connect with our authentic life stories and see how they impact our existence. And so the History Project was born. It empowers you to unify your disconnected assets, artifacts, medias, and memory with the help of technology to build these rich and creative stories, and also with the help of intelligent and talented writers and storytellers. And the journey has been incredible. Hearing people's stories, watching them build their stories, helping them build their stories, and we've learned a lot and are still learning about how to harness the power of our history. Make history a habit. Shift that notion of history as a passive, inanimate object in our lives. When you guys hear history, you probably think of textbooks and antiquated time capsules that are buried in the ground to be reached at a specific spot, at a specific time, often curated in a specific voice. Well, history is more than that. History is an active and fluid resource. Don't think of history as a well in which to search and draw from. History is a stream that parallels our lives, gives us direction, and continues to shape our existence. Make history a habit. And it's not drastic changes in your life. In fact, it's the small things, like incorporating family stories and histories into dinner-time conversations with your kids. In 2009, Emory University study that gets quoted quite frequently, like here in the Washington Post, found that the greater connection to family history led to more positive outcomes for teens. It led to higher measures of self-esteem. It led to greater amounts of control of their future. It led to resilience of hardships, better academic performance, and better relationships with their parents. Who needs a self-help book when there are family stories to be told? And I'm amazed how stories told or untold can make the difference in someone's life. When I was building the History Project, I interviewed a number of other founders and entrepreneurs, asking them about their experiences. And I met this one young lady, and she told me about starting her business. She was working 18 to 20 hours a day, on the brink of quitting. She was exhausted. And then she sat down with her grandma. And her grandma, for the first time, revealed her own details of her immigration process to this country from Eastern Europe 50 years ago. That put everything into perspective for her. And she continued to build her business, which is thriving. She's still working hard, but is thriving now. But it blows my mind that something that happened 50 years ago could make such an impact on someone's present and shape their future, and that story was almost never told to her. The same is true from organizations as it is individuals. Institutional knowledge and organizational history is one of the most valuable assets. When we work with groups and organizations, we often help them find ways to preserve their history and put it into the part of their behavior within that organization. From a founder's vision down to the Herculean task of an employee on the ground floor, all of those things deserve more than an ephemeral corporate memo. They deserve to be stored, retained, activated, celebrated, and are part of a shared community of network and stories. I will bet you that in the next decade, all major companies will have some historians on staff. Make history a habit. Tell your stories and tell them powerfully. As we've learned and experienced these stories, we've found that there are a few traits to the most powerful stories on the History Project. The first, multiple mediums. How do you find not just those photos, but the oral histories that go with those photos? The video, the music. We're now playing with 3D printing because tactile sensations also bring back memories. We're even researching on digital smells. Some of you look horrified and excited about that at the same time. But those are all things that are coming. How do you trigger those sensory nuances? Have a strong organizing framework. Strong organizing frameworks like timelines. I love timelines and maps because space and time give us this inherent contextual narrative to the things we do. I think we all have that uncle where he has great stories, but it seems like everything happened in the 70s. But when you actually sit down with him and chart out what happened during that time, you start making the connections, the cause and effect, the dots to lines. The third thing, add historical perspective. One of the cool things that we've started to do, especially with working with a vibrant aging population, is to bring Billboard chart music from years as far as 1945. We've been working with our content partners at the Associated Press to bring headlines in, and it's amazing the memories that are triggered from these songs and these headlines, things that people had totally forgotten about. The other thing is it makes their life stories feel a part of something bigger, a network of histories, something that we've started to dub the history of we. So I'm going to give you guys one last example. It's universal. It cuts across gender, ethnic, and generational lines. It's fried chicken. Sorry to vegetarians. In fact, it's grandma's fried chicken. Because when you get grandma's original fried chicken recipe, you're pretty excited. That's pretty awesome, especially if it's Malaysian fried chicken from your ama. That itself is a direct translation of the past into a tangible present. But what if you don't only get that recipe, but you have a video of your grandmother cooking that fried chicken? And you have not only what she cooked, but how she cooked it. Now, you think to yourself of if you get the music that grandma loved to listen to while she was in her kitchen cooking that fried chicken. You not only have what she cooked, how she cooked it, but you have the spirit with which she cooked it in. And you take that farther and you notice in the recipe that there are unique ingredients, somewhat limited ingredients, and you discover and learn that that recipe was a factor of the food constraints during the World War II when her island was being occupied. Now, when you bite into that chicken, there's something far more special, something far more inspired, something far more delicious than you could have imagined. And when you're cooking with your family and friends, even if your grandma's not there, her spirit will be. Make history a habit. Make sure your stories are told and tell those stories powerfully. Because history connects us. It inspires us. It delights us. It's not only one of our most powerful media, it's also our tool to make us wiser, to make our families stronger, to make our organizations better, to make our society smarter. So before I conclude, I'd like to ask a favor of you. If everyone could take a moment and close your eyes and think to yourself of one person that you want to capture the history of. On the count of 3, I want you guys to open your eyes and say that person's name. 1, 2, 3. So if you believe in building a better future by harnessing the power of your past, then make history your habit today. Thank you.